Hi all, this is a video explaining a recent project I did to help my application for a job at Hello Games, the creators of the well-known No Man's Sky. This is similar to a design test, but I did not get given the design test by a company, but I challenged myself. I tend to do this when I'm applying for a studio that I'm particularly passionate about to help my application stand out against other applicants. I started by simply playing through a game. For this project, I chose The Last Campfire as it seemed a small game that I could play in a short period of time, and I liked the aesthetic. As I progressed, I developed my own design document, taking notes of the player objectives and game mechanics, the elements of the game that would be important to know if I was going to design my own level or puzzle. The Last Campfire is a stylized, narrative-driven puzzle game about a character called Ember. Some of the puzzles in the game were quite small, so for this reason I thought just designing a single puzzle won't be enough of a challenge, so I thought I would design 3 puzzles, as that sounded like a nice number to aim for. Additionally, the game is split up into 3 sections: the forest, the marsh, and the cave. Each introduces new mechanics to the puzzles, so I thought it would be fitting that I designed a puzzle for each area. That way, each one of the puzzles will allow me to use a different set of mechanics. I will be designing puzzles. The context for puzzles in the game is that you are helping to solve some kind of problem that a character in the game has. These characters are referred to as a forlorn. The problem that the character is facing is often represented in the puzzle itself. For example, one puzzle is based on a turtle character who is a chef. He's hunched over a cooking pot, but the fire has gone out. The puzzle that the player solves has you collecting an ember of fire and trying to transport it back to the character without it getting blown out by a fan or the wind. So in this puzzle, the story that the character has gone through is represented literally in the puzzle. I aim to do a similar thing with my puzzles, so therefore I need to create some kind of character arc for the Forlorn character before creating the puzzle and trying to see if I can integrate the story of the character into my puzzles. For my process, one of the things I do is establish design goals. These will be created and informed by my understanding of the game's core design and intentions. So when it comes to my goals, first one is, puzzles are innately integrated within the context of the Forlorn's character arc, meaning the player should be able to see a connection between the Forlorn's character they're saving and the puzzles they're solving. Second of all, puzzles are short and not too challenging. One thing I noticed through playing the game is how accessible a lot of the puzzles are. They're not too complicated, just simple brain teasers. These goals represent my best guess of what the design goals would have been for the game at the team over at Hello Games. So, the Forlorn characters. I will create 3 Forlorn characters for each one of the 3 puzzles. This design challenge is brief, and I don't have unlimited time, so therefore this is not going to be the deepest dive into the characters, so therefore I will deliberately keep it simple. Not all character arcs I came up with and I'm about to explain to you would actually fit in the game. Game design is a lot about iteration, and I'm sure with some time, some of these ideas could be turned into puzzles that would have ended up in the game. But due to time, I'm just telling you some of the initial ideas and the initial vision for the puzzles. The Forest Forlorn is the first character. This Forlorn was trying to escape the forest and climbed a section of a mountain and was caught in a storm and didn't know where they were and didn't know how to get back down. Then they lost hope and became forlorn. Through solving the puzzle, the player will highlight some kind of path on the ground for the Forlorn. Now the Marsh Forlorn. In the story of the game, the marsh is being controlled by the Bird King, who is manipulating the embers into giving up hope. This Forlorn was travelling through the marshes and reached a point that they couldn't jump across and lost hope. The player, in the puzzle, will build some kind of bridge across a body of water, helping the character to see there is always a way out if you are willing to create one yourself. The Cave Forlorn. This Forlorn resists and escapes the Bird King, only to get lost in the Cave of Regret. The player can help give them back their fire ember and highlight all that the ember has achieved so far. Now that I've come up with some basic stories of the Forlorn characters, I can start working on the script. During a number of the Forlorn puzzles in the game, the narrator explains the story of the character. I'm quite dyslexic, so I know for a fact that poetry is not my strong point. I created some basic statements of the story and then gave it to ChatGPT to make it more poetic. It's not perfect, but it will do for the sake of this project. You can see them on the screen now for each one of the characters. Now that I have some narration designed for each of the stories, I can start designing the actual puzzle. The next stage in my process is to decide what mechanics I'm using in each of the puzzles. I've already created a list of mechanics used in the puzzles throughout the game, and I've organised them into what was used in each stage. So I can pick the mechanics that were most interesting to me in each stage of the game and use them for my own puzzles. Additionally, I can choose the mechanics to help me create a puzzle that best represents the story of the Forlorn character. The Forest Forlorn. As I said earlier, the story of this Forlorn is they get lost in a storm and the player is going to show them the way out by highlighting path. It seems fitting that fire should be used, as it would fit the idea that the player is lighting the way for the Forlorn. The player will have to light a series of campfires, navigating air fans to eventually burn away brambles, allowing them to access the ember. I did this same process for my next two puzzles. If you'd like more details, please look at my documentation linked on my portfolio page. But for now, I'll just skip straight to how the puzzles turned out. This is my 2D design for the Forest Forlorn. So now I'm going to explain this puzzle. The player's mission is to get to the puzzle endpoint, but they can't access it as it is covered in the branches. They will need to light the 3 campfires to get a flame to burn down the branches. They are unable to directly light the first campfire as there is a fan in the way which blows out their torch, so they will have to burn the branches and walk around. This will introduce that mechanic to ensure the player knows about it for later. The player will then have to roll 2 stones in order to block the fan. They will then be able to light the final campfire. The final element of the puzzle is a combination of the last 2 elements. The player will be unable to burn the branches directly as there's a fan in the way, so they will need to burn the branches over to the right and then roll the stone so they can get to the back and then burn the branches. That will enable them to reach the end of the puzzle. This is the 2D design for the Marsh Forlorn puzzle. As you can see in the image, there is a bridge, but the player needs to activate each section to get across. They will be given metal blocks. The metal blocks need to be sat in the socket. When this happens, the socket will activate the corresponding bridge sections. The player will be able to move around the metal blocks. With 2 metal blocks, they will be able to activate the first platform, which will give them an extra block. Then, with all 3 blocks, they will then be able to activate the second platform and then activate the first one again. They can then take their final metal block and activate the third platform. So this puzzle has the player travelling down to the bottom right of the level to collect an ember and carry it back to the top without the ember being blown out. The first air fan can be avoided by moving the metal block in front of it. After this, the player can move the snake so they can get over to the ember, but they will have to maneuver the snake a different way than they came so they can avoid the fan. They can then walk back up the stairs and finish the puzzle. One thing I would like to say before I move on to the next stage. As I said earlier, game design is an iterative process. Ideally, I would love to make these puzzles functional and test them, get feedback and iterate, and then repeat that process multiple times. For this time scale of the project, that's not possible. So it's best to think of these puzzles not as the final product, but as an initial idea of what they could be. Now onto the whiteboxing. I will be creating my whitebox in Unreal Engine. This is because the prototyping tools are much quicker and there is a top-down point-and-click template already installed into Unreal Engine. At this stage, I also decided that I was only going to whitebox the first puzzle. I prefer to add a good amount of detail and polish on one puzzle rather than rushing to complete all 3. I started by making the rough shape of the environment and then adding polish and detail after that. I created various basic 3D models that represent the different mechanics the player will be using. I also managed to find a 3D model on Sketchfab of the character Ember from the game, so I imported that into Unreal and used it as the character. As a final touch, added some grass and other elements to bring some more life into the scene and make it feel like a real scene from the game. Thanks for watching my little overview of this project. This has been a completely passion-fueled project. I made it to help my application for a game designer position at Hello Games, and I thought it was probably a cool idea to make it into a video for my channel. I really hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it. It really helps support the channel, and consider subscribing. Cheers.